And welcome back. Of course, we're moving into our second conversation for today. We have with us representatives of the Turneffe Atoll Sustainability Association, TSAA. We're going to find out a bit about some of the work that they're doing at the beautiful Turneffe Atoll. And we have with us Elise Cobb, who is the Education and Outreach Coordinator, and Valdemar Andrade, who is the Executive Director. Good morning and welcome, and thank you for being here.
Good morning, thanks for having us.
Let's begin by talking about TSAA. It seems a fairly new association on the landscape, so to speak. Begin by talking to us about it, how it was formed, and what the purpose of TSAA is.
Sure. Okay, so the Turneffe Atoll Marine Reserve was a gap in the protected area system for a long time. And in 2012, the fishing community and the tourism community managed to lobby to get it passed after 20 years of lobbying to get it done. Because of course, there are development, there are different things, so you have to try to put it in place. In 2013, TSAA was formed as an association of stakeholders, basically the fishing community, the tourism community, people from the University of Belize, people with interest in conservation, formed TSAA to co-manage the area, so that there is a co-management agency to basically help the government do the work of managing the marine reserve and raising the necessary resources to be. So TSAA is made up of 7 board members from the stakeholder community who basically have a co-management agreement with the government of Belize that was done in 2013 to manage the Turneffe Atoll Marine Reserve. And so our job is basically now to implement the management plan for the Turneffe Atoll Marine Reserve, which is the largest of the atolls in Belize, of the 3 atolls. It is very significant in terms of the resources that is there, in terms of the ecosystems, the fishing resources, what it contributes to the economy in terms of tourism, in terms of protection, in terms of hurricanes. So there's a lot of, and there's also a lot of development on the area.
Yeah. Now, I think one of the things, not many people have visited the Turneffe Atolls. It's so far away. Let's start off there. But it is important, and it reminds me so much of conversation that takes place with the Chickee Bowl, kind of being on the other end. When you don't see and experience what you're talking about, the connection to people sometimes doesn't come about as easily. How do you work within different communities and different associations to have them understand why this is such an important marine protected area?
Well, from our plan, or our management plan, the education and outreach is one of the important components of all the work that we do in terms of managing the reserve. No? So we try, as we mentioned, we have key stakeholder communities that uses the marine reserve, mostly from the northern communities, Copperbank, Turneffe, Turneffe. We have people from both Kikaka and San Pedro in terms of tourism and boat fishing, and people from the Belize. Belize City also does use it in terms of fishing and tourism. So we try to reach to them from all levels, community levels, going to the national levels, and even to regional levels, in terms of trying to do as much activities. In one case, for example, we do a lot of schools outreach, trying to reach to all to the different schools, so that we do in terms of presentations or trying to participate in maybe some of their events, their culture day events, career days. We try to reach out to them, try to educate to them as much as we can in terms of sharing as much information as we can, so that with aim that they would understand why the marine reserve is important to their communities, but as a whole, to assist us, because we cannot do the job by ourselves. We try to reach as much as we can, so that they could help us in spreading the word, spreading the news, spreading that information that is very important for us, to them to understand the marine reserves. And also we work in collaboration with, as you mentioned, with other stakeholder groups. I mean, there's the University of Belize, who has a research station at the Calabash Key, and at the moment we are carrying out with them educational trips, so that it's not just reaching to the community, but also trying to give them that opportunity. Try to take them out there so that they could get that first-hand experience and actually see and live and actually know what is out there. Because at times we know their parents try to educate them, try to share to them as much of the activities that they do on site, but it's very hard to them to understand it. If they don't see it, they don't understand it, and they don't appreciate it much. So that's what we are having at the moment. With
So that's
them.
why you try to show them all the work. We saw you had some pretty cute mascots as well. So that's one way to get their attention.
So the other thing we do with the fishers is we do boat to boat. So
Yes.
basically, Elise goes out with the conservation officers, rangers, who basically, so he goes and speaks to them, not from an enforcement point of view, because you know when you're in enforcement position, it's very difficult to transfer information. So he goes out as an educator and just talks to them about what the boundaries are, what the different zones are, what are the rules and regulations of, since we are now implementing and enforcing. And so, you know, we basically go literally from boat to boat and talk to all the 8 or 10 fishers that are on the sailboats, or the couple fishers that are on the skiff, or we go to the camps as well and we speak to them about what is proper, what is not, what are the new regulations, what is allowed. Like, you know, there are no jet skis allowed out there, no scuba tanks allowed out there, you can't fish with, you know, you can't fish with spare guns. You know, so there are certain things that we try to educate them on.
What is the most important sell to fishermen and to Belizeans on a whole in respect of this education campaign?
Okay, so in reality, I mean, a lot of people look at environmental NGOs as just managing ecosystems and wildlife. And basically, that's far from the actual work that we do. The work that we do, just like our name says, is sustainability. It's about the economy. It's what it provides to the fishers and the tourism community, you know. So tourism and fishing are the #1 and #2 foreign exchange earners. And so the direct contributions to GDP are tremendous. But the direct contributions to the table in these communities are even more important because it is significant. You know, 90% of the communities in Shunush, Kapabang, Tartania are fishers. And so that's what they do. And so it is for them to be able to have better fish stocks, to be able to have more mature fish and be catching less effort for more catch at the end of the day.
Yeah.
We're also working with different organizations like TNC and WCS, Wildlife Conservation Society and the Nature Conservancy, to look at getting better pricing for the fish so that you can take less but get a better price. You know, they're working with whole lobsters now. So those are the kind of work that we're doing with them. We're also looking at supplementary livelihoods, because I don't like the term alternative, because a fisher has a boat and an engine. He can't very well bring it on land and do anything else with that. And so right now we're working with the Turneffe seaweed growers along with the Nature Conservancy to see how we can develop a solid seaweed program, but beyond just the local market to sell to the foreign market, but value add as well, because you know seaweed is used for many things. It's used in cosmetics, it's used as a base for ice cream, it's used for many things. So how can we value add and make sure that there is a solid program on the ground? So we're not doing it by ourselves. You know, we are getting help from Bell Trade, from different people to look at the markets, look at how we can develop.
And that's such a fascinating program that they have ongoing there. I wanted to touch into looking at what your greatest challenges are. I will assume you'll say illegal fishing, but let me just, I wanted to add in one point there. We've seen where the sustainable fishing practices have really been adopted by fishermen. We've spoken to fishing associations here. They understand because they see the changes in the access to resources. When it comes to the Turneffe Atoll and the islands in that area, how are you countering the challenges, including illegal fishing?
Well, just
like they never stop. True. I like that side.
I mean, those people have been, well, they have been accustomed to use the area in such a way, you know. And even though there are the regulations and different laws that they need to abide, but in the past there wasn't like that presence, that enforcement presence. So getting them to kind of now adapt or try to work on how we would put it, work on a straight path without breaking any rules and regulations. So that has been one of our challenges from the beginning, and we really did encounter that a lot, like not really resistance from the fishers, but them getting to know the area in terms of education. Yeah. They weren't that aware.
So it's not that they are just breaking the laws and going there because that's where the better catch is. That's what you're saying. it's because they aren't fully aware of the regulations?
They weren't fully aware in terms of the zones, to be specific, because to be honest with you, fishers know the regulations. When it comes to fishers regulations, they know the sizes, what the size, legal size, when it closes, all those things. Sometimes fishers might want to play last in terms of trying to get off of the illegal activities, no. But that, in this case, that wasn't the issue. The issue, I mean, one of the areas of contention was they don't know exactly the boundaries and where the zones were, and some of the different regulations that might apply to those zones. But now, from the time we started up to now, we could see that the fishers are actually, we are getting there. We're communicating that to them. So they are getting aware of the different rules, different zones, and why it's important to them. So it's just a working process, but we could say that we are there. We are actually moving forward with that.
So in terms of, you're saying the challenges, I mean, Turneffe is not that far, to be honest. It's only about 25 miles east of Belize City, so it's very accessible to Belize City. So, you know, basically as a straight to Calabash is 25 miles. The atoll is actually huge, so it's 30 miles long by 10 miles wide. So no, it is a resource issue because we have to use up a lot of, we have 8 conservation officers, 4 in the north at Margaki and 4 at Calabash that patrol the area, and we are burning up a lot of fuel to do that. And so hopefully as time goes by, we can use technology, you can use different things to do the patrolling drones, you know, looking at different options to be able to see how we can minimize and become more effective and efficient. So those are some of the challenges, our resources. Fortunately right now, we thankful to the Bertarelli Foundation, who has been funding us for the past couple of years. And we are also working with the Nature Conservancy, the Wildlife Conservation Society. The Fisheries Department has been tremendous in their support. UBERI has been tremendous in their support. So it's something that we cannot do alone. So it's very resource intensive. But I think what will help is when we are able now to gather the data and share it with the fishers, because I think a big gap is for them to understand what the data is saying. Because for me, one of the gaps that I see is that this data has not been shared with the fishers enough for them to appreciate and understand, because the decision on how we manage is really not ours as TSAA or the government as fisheries. If the resource user does not become conversant with the data and say, okay, yes, now we have to drop production because we are now seeing more and more juvenile fishes rather than, and we know even with the current size limit in conch, for example, when we look at the data, we're harvesting sexually immature conch. That's not a good thing, because at the end of the day, you're taking away your brood stock.
Let me ask you this. When you speak of data, it seems that you're speaking from a scientific perspective. How do you break that down for the average fisherman to understand that the particular activity in which they may be engaged in is having an adverse effect on the fisheries? How do you break that down for them to understand?
Okay, so they understand, you know, they understand because they are seeing less and less catch, and they're using more and more effort, they're burning more fuel, they're using more days to catch the same amount of fish. So from that point of view, they understand that they're using more effort. However, if we add the data and let them understand, look, you're seeing more, in terms of the fin fish, you're seeing more juveniles instead of mature fish. And so because, remember for us, if it fits in a plate, we eat it. But it doesn't mean that it's sexually mature fish. Because if you're talking about a grouper, a sexually mature grouper is huge, right, compared to other species. The same thing with lobsters. You know, right now, fortunately, the market is paying more for 5 ounces and up. And so that has moved the market into them catching more bigger lobsters, which is a good thing from a science perspective. However, that has not happened for conch. And so how do we move to that regime and see? And then we have to put this data in front of them, break it down and let them understand, okay, this is why you're using more effort, because what you're doing is taking less conchs. Now, by the time we catch them, and even like recently we had 3 major busts. One was about 8,000, one was about 5,000, one was about 3,000. And the courts are really helping us. However, by the time we catch them, they're all illegal, it's dead. There's nothing you can do about it then. You can't put them back. They're only good to eat at that point in time.
Well, we've seen good enforcement efforts. I think you do want to point that out. We report it quite often, and you know, appreciating how stringent the laws are and follow up. you are right. It's not the ideal situation.
No.
You don't want the marine resource out of the waters.
And those are things that whenever we try to have regular sessions within those communities, even at the community or even here within Belize. Fishers are represented in different groups that try to do in terms of the marine reserve management. So we try to reach as much to them through those sessions, discuss maybe any concerns or any issues being raised, but at the same time share this data with them, broken down as simple as we can so that they could understand it. And even, you might be surprised that even illegal activities, even those things tends to be a topic within those discussions. And fishers do understand that there needs to be some sort of penalties for those fishers doing those activities, and to us that's a win to us, because they're seeing this, they're understanding the reason why they shouldn't continue doing those things. So, and those sessions tend to help us a lot in terms of strengthening that communication, but at the same time filling that gap in terms of the science.
I'm glad that you were able to mention the idea of penalties being affixed to certain infractions, right? From your point of view, do you believe, however, that the penalties, the fines that are levied against fishermen for illegal fisheries activity are fair and worth it? When you look at the number of catch, for instance, and the size of the catch versus the penalties that come from the magistrate's court, do you believe that the punishment fits the crime?
It's an excellent question, because no, they don't. They don't fit the crime. Now, one of the things we always talk about with respect in this aspect is that while they are, in my opinion, they feel entitled to using that resource because they have traditionally used it for many, many years, they also have a responsibility, right, of using it under the rules and regulations. However, the fisheries regulations are very old regulations, and were from a time when we had a different science, a different catch. I mean, at Key Glory, you could literally see the groupers in the ground. I mean, literally, you know, you could probably pick them up with your hand or with a skillet and just put them on the stove, you know. But now that's not the situation. So we have had no managed access. However, for managed access to work, the Fisheries Resources Bill has been languishing for 6 years. You know, that's something that we are working with the current Minister Figueroa and his team to put in place. We would like to get that done by June of this year, because really and truly, that encompasses the fines that you're talking about. Because if I fine somebody and it's not prohibitive, they will go and do it again. It's just like cutting the mangroves. You cut the mangroves and then you just go and do it again, because the fine is less than actually doing it at the end of the day. There are also certain species that are not captured currently in the laws, you know, like sharks are not captured in totality in the laws, so sharks are being taken indiscriminately. You know, there are many grazers that are not captured in the law that help the reef, you know, balance at the end of the day, that are not captured in the law. There are so many, much of the finfish are not captured in the law at all. You know, there are also certain processes and procedures that are not captured in the law for us to process fishermen when they do illegal activities. So the Fisheries Resources Bill has to be passed for managed access to be able to take in place, because managed access has helped us, because now the resource user has a committee whereby they say, okay, Isani has had 3 issues lately with illegal fishing. So now we'll say, okay, you're banned from Turneffe. You can't go back to Turneffe till after another while. So they're doing from their part along with the fisheries department, but there's only so much the fisheries department and they can do without having that legislative backup at the end of the day. So your question is very solid, is very valid, and no, it is not conversant with the current situation at this point in time. And that is why you see many times, fortunately, in our area, we don't have much of illegal fishes from out of the country. But in areas where you have issues with illegal fishes from out of the country, it becomes an issue. For example, sharks are taken across the border every day, you know, but there's nothing to prevent it once they do their custom entries and do everything, because there are no laws to prevent and saying that it cannot be sold. You know, so your question is very, very pointed and very important.
Now let's talk about some of the future plans for the organization, for the association. Since your establishment in 2013, we hear of your efforts in terms of education for conservation and how you work along with other entities. What would you say is your hallmark program and what you see yourself focusing on as a priority in the future?
Okay, All right. So on March 1st, which I had invited Mr. Isani to come out and for inauguration of our conservation post and headquarters on Calabash Key and Margaret Key, are basically the areas from which we will do education, outreach, and enforcement. Enforcement right now is the Hallmark program. So the enforcement team is the bedrock. Yeah. Those 9 people out there are the bedrock of ensuring that people do what they're supposed to do. And it's really hard work. You know, sometimes they have to wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning trying to track people, because right now we have some illegal fishers working around there trying to do different activities, and we have to be monitoring them. You know, we work along with the Coast Guard, we work along with fisheries. So that is really the Hallmark program at this point in time. Along with education, and I'll ask Elise to talk a little bit about the program.
In terms of the education, like I mentioned, we had already started with kids. So eventually we hope that we would take families or even adults from the communities, the fishers' wives, to get that experience, to know the areas the fishers use, and eventually include the fishers themselves. It contribute towards education also, to help us identify key fishers that could help us in sharing that knowledge, so that they could become role models within their communities, and for other fishers to follow them as an example, no? And include the fishers themselves in terms of the science component, so that for them to get involved, for them to appreciate what's out there, to understand what is out there, so that not just involving them, but them to also be included whenever we have any activities within the communities, so that they could share that first-hand experience, the appreciation of what is out there. And for them, like I said, for them to be as examples, so that other fishers could get involved and understand the real reason why put or continue doing sustainable fishery, but at the same time keep that protection to them to keep providing for their entire families, for their livelihoods.
One of the areas I'd like to discuss as we quickly run out of time is looking at the issue of development. We've seen more and more interest in Valdemar, in your past profession, you know this well, where people want to be able to capitalize on what are some of the most beautiful areas of our country, Turneffe definitely being on that list. How does the association work to be able to ensure that as a protected area, that there will be limitations in terms of what can and won't be, what will and won't be allowed in the area?
Sure, and you're right on track there. Development is one of our biggest challenges as well.
You do have some tourism sites there that
we do have some resort, and it's mainly overnight tourism, mainly fly fishing, diving are the key hallmark to activities there. However, in terms of the development, we are working along with the Turneffe Atoll Trust to develop a developer's guideline to be able, because yes, it's a marine reserve, so there are it's prescriptive development at the end of the day. We are not saying you cannot develop, because a lot of Belizeans also own property out there, a lot of fishers, so they would like to put in a pier to take their family out there, to have a little house. And so, I mean, it's not something that we're going to say, no, you're not going to develop, but it has to be under certain guidelines. Only so much mangroves can be cleared or not cleared. There's only a certain amount of pier that can be done, and every step requires you going to a different agency. So we're trying to put together a one-stop guideline to say, okay, if you're going to develop this type of development, then this is what you have to do. We're also sharing the science with those developers, because they might have turtle nesting grounds in their areas. They might have reef next to their areas and in a close vicinity, because a lot of the Turneffe area are flats. That's what you're saying. A lot of people talk about the Turneffe flats. And flats mean it's very, very shallow water right on the reef, right on the back reef, and which is very important for the fishery as well. So we have to manage the relationship between the tourism activities and the fishing activities, you know. So it is very important, and that is one of the reasons why right now we have gotten funding to do a climate change program, because also along with the fishers and the tourism providers, we need to let them understand that there are certain things that are happening there that are beyond all our control, you know, in terms of climate change, acidification of the waters, recent issues with the coral reef. You know, so that is why we're asking them to behave in a certain way, because we don't have control over that, but we have control over our behavior and how we work along with the ecosystem to get what we need. Because at the end of the day, that's in reality what we are doing, is managing the resource for our use at the end of the day. So yes, development is a major challenge, but we have the conversations with the developers. We ask them to do their environmental impact assessments. Any of the resorts, when they're expanding, they send us their EIA or EIS. We review, we give them our opinion. At the end of the day, it's up to the Department of Environment to give the final say, or whichever department, if it's a pier, if it's a building, whatever, at the end of the day. But yes, it has to be guided, and there are some no-nos at all that are not allowed in the area. But we have of recent moved fish traps, beach traps. We have moved people out of the areas where they thought they could do certain things. We are rezoning right now, and so there are going to be certain restrictions on, for example, in certain areas, they're only be able to use hand lines. They won't be able to use any other equipment, so it's very equipment specific because you're trying to manage the resource in a certain way.
And what are the opportunities for Belizeans to be able to have an experience at the atolls?
Well, definitely that's something that we would try to look in the future, not just the community themselves, because what we are doing, we are managing what is out there. We're trying to put that protection in terms of continue providing for the communities who use them directly, but also for the entire country of Belize. What we have out there is not for TSAA, it's not just for the communities that use it, but for the entire country of Belize. So eventually we would be including them, trying to secure the funds so that we could do other trips for maybe for other communities outside of the users. And then right now it's important to mention that with the University of Belize, those school trips that are being done at the moment, it's not just for the stakeholder communities. We did mention the stakeholder communities Copperbank because it's the communities that we work with. But under this program with the University of Belize, they're also giving opportunities to the other districts, to other schools. We have schools from Corozal or Andrade district that had already been there. There are also schools from Belize City that have also been there. So those are opportunities that are trying to be giving out, trying to get it out there so that the kids could get that first-hand experience. No?
Absolutely.
So Turneffe Atoll Marine Reserve is 131,690 hectares. So there's a lot for Belizeans to enjoy. And as I said, it's not about us preventing any Belizean or any developer or any fisher from going out there. It's just going under the proper regime, discussing with us what can be done or how can we work together. And then it can be done at the end of the day. Both of you are invited to come out. I really would like you, Isani, to come out on one of these school trips with the kids for you to understand the tremendous amount of work that's being done, but also to understand the opportunities that are there. So there are beaches for people to go. Again, it's only an hour as the crow flies from here, hour 15, let's say, depending on which boat you take. And so we invite people to come out. We invite people to enjoy because it is ours. And really and truly, if people don't get out there, they cannot appreciate why is it that we want to protect these ecosystems. Why are we discussing major issues around these ecosystems, you know? And you're right, many people don't get the opportunity, and that is why we are trying to create people to see, touch, feel, because if you don't see it, feel it, touch it. I mean, like these kids that went out on Saturday, they got the opportunity to see dolphins. The dolphins swam right alongside, you know. That's something that kids will never forget.
That's right.
They will understand what, because when we put a slide on the PowerPoint presentation in their classroom, they're like, oh maybe you might see it, but when they see it and they feel it and touch it, it's a different situation. So what UB does is they set up a touch tank so that they can interact with some of the ecosystems, so that they can see it on, they can actually see it live and direct, and so. That's the opportunity we are trying to offer to all Belizeans.
Great way for them to understand the value.
But we invite Channel 5 to come out. We're happy to take you around so that you can see the conservation posts and understand what is coming out. So we're developing a couple films that will come out later on this year, and I will ask Channel 5 to air some of those. To look at the work that we're doing, but also like a day in the life of a fisher, so people can understand what a fisher goes through. Because many times you might think, oh, 20 pounds for a pound of lobster, but you don't understand what the fisher goes through to put it out there, the bad weather they have to deal with every year. The same thing at the end of life.
Staying watch over their trap.
Exactly, and you have resource conflicts, you know, because you have sailboats, skiff fishers, camp fishers, so you have different issues. You know, so those are some of the things we are trying to resolve as we work along with the stakeholders as well, and trying to get a count of what we have, because we are also trying to establish whether we are overusing the resource, and that will be a challenge, because if we establish that, then we have to decide how do we roll it back, how do we dial it back. How do we manage it at the end of the day? So that is where we are. We invite you to come out, as I said.
Well, hopefully that will be in the very near future. We'll hear more about TSAA after a visit, right?
Sure.
So thank you for being here this morning and letting us know about some of the conservation efforts that you're doing. And we'll have you back soon. I'm very sure of that.
Sure. Thank you for having us. And I want to thank my team, especially the conservation officers who are there. They go 2 weeks in and 14 days on, 7 days out. So that's a rotation schedule they deal with.
All right. We're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we'll be joined by the Belize Protectors to talk about the competition results of the Bakers to Vegas race. So stay tuned.